Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Manifesting Lab members webinar where anything can happen. We are literally out of control in this webinar, but hopefully we will regain control because the subject of the webinar is controlling uncontrollable thoughts. And perhaps that might even include uncontrollable webinars. We shall see. We shall see. Today's subject, and in fact today's webinar, is going to contain the following. First of all, you are going to learn how to control uncontrollable thoughts, which in a webinar called Controlling Uncontrollable Thoughts is pretty obvious. Also, you are going to learn how to make people addicted to anything. Yes, really. This is the point at which I expect you to laugh uncontrollably in a really evil way at this computer screen, so go ahead and feel free to do so. We are going to make people addicted. And the reason we're going to learn about that is because this is being done to you every single day. So this is part of the understanding of what makes an uncontrollable thought, because this is being done to you. We're also going to learn the art of momentum boxing, which is another little idea that I've not revealed before, a bit like maybe a couple of other ideas in this webinar, or at least I've not put it as clearly as I'm going to put it today. So it's well worth paying attention to this one, momentum boxing, and we shall then jump into an ultimate method. And this ultimate, for those of you who've attended the previous webinars will know there's usually an ultimate somewhere, and this ultimate is the ultimate soothing thought. And I'm going to put forwards to you as a suggestion that no matter how uncontrollable your thoughts are, just by thinking this single ultimate soothing thought, you are going to be in a better feeling place than you were before you thought it. Now that's quite a claim. I'll see if this webinar can live up to the claim. I'll see if I can live up to the claim, and if I can't, I shall leave the country very quickly. So let's get started. Here is the webinar map for this totally uncontrollable yet attempting to be controllable webinar. First of all, we're going to look at, starting from the top left, what makes thoughts uncontrollable in the first place, which would be a good logical place to start. We will then be looking at how to win the battle of uncontrollability, and if winning the battle of uncontrollability was not good enough, we will then win the war of uncontrollability. And as you can tell, yes, we are getting back into the rather below the surface violent undertones that we're used to in the Manifesting Lab. And don't worry, there's plenty more coming. So let's get started. First of all, what makes thoughts uncontrollable? And in order to figure that out, maybe we should define what an uncontrollable thought actually is. And in fact, as a bit of audience participation, assuming that you've not already left the webinar in disgust, let me ask you a question. And it's a pretty basic question, but I think the answer, I don't know. I don't know if people will get this as clearly as I think they will. I don't know. Let's see. The question is simply, why do uncontrollable thoughts matter? Why does it matter if you have uncontrollable thoughts? Simple question. Would anyone like to have a go at answering that one? And if you have an answer, please enter it into the chat box rather than uncontrollably shout it at the screen. And I won't read out names just in case I embarrass anybody. Oh, yes, people have got this. This is really good. Yes, they can affect our feelings and thereby our vibrations. And another answer, because they influence your vibration. Very good. Very, 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 very good. Very good indeed. Because quite often people think that uncontrollable thoughts matter because they make you feel bad. And yes, they make you feel bad, but that's not the main point. The main point is that the law of attraction is responding to those uncontrollable thoughts. It's not responding to emotion. People often think that the law of attraction is responding to emotion because we talk so much about good feeling emotions, but it doesn't. Emotions are indicators. Law of attraction is responding to thought. So if your dominant thoughts are uncontrollable, what that will mean is your life is going to feel out of control. And it's a vicious cycle because you feel out of control, which means you think more uncontrollable thoughts, and then the law of attraction makes you feel even more out of control. So let's just look at some symptoms of this uncontrollability that people often experience when they are out of control. And I'm sure most of us here will have experienced some of these at some point. The first one that springs to mind is you feel you are at the mercy of the thought and the resulting behavior. And that resulting behavior we often call compulsive or addictive, and we'll be talking about that shortly. The other symptom of uncontrollability is you feel like the thought is thinking you. So this is a phrase that Abraham liked to come up with, and it's a really, really clever phrase because you are the thinker of a thought. However, when you think a thought enough, that thought becomes a thinker also. So you could say that your physical self is the thought that your inner being has thought about long enough that it has created you through that thought, and now you have become the thinker. And that is actually vibrationally accurate. Now, when you, the thinker, the physical thinker, now think a thought, you can think those thoughts so much that they start to think, and now you feel that the roles are reversed and the thought is thinking you. That's an example of uncontrollability. It's almost like you've created a monster, a bit like in the movie Frankenstein or the book, where Frankenstein's monster was kind of more than Dr. Frankenstein was. And the other symptom of uncontrollability is you can't stop yourself, even when you know what you're doing is hurting you. And this is one of the worst things of all. It's as though you are on this roller coaster and you know there's a gap in the track ahead and you know it's going to fly off the end of this roller coaster into oblivion, but you can't get off the roller coaster. And that's something that I've experienced myself, and I know that other people have experienced it. And it comes from this feeling of uncontrollability, and that comes from that law of attraction responding to chaotic, uncontrollable thoughts. So we spoke a little bit in that last section about symptoms of uncontrollability. Here's a few examples that I've hinted at already. One is you obsess about thoughts. The other, that a few people have mentioned this, you can't stop worrying. Because worry is an uncontrollable thought. You're thinking about something you don't want. That's what worry is. Another example, you can't stop negative self-talk. So you do something you think is good, and now you hear this voice in your head going, no, that's rubbish. No, you're no good. You're no good. And this again is something that does affect people. It's uncontrollable. It's an example of an uncontrollable thought. So it deserves to be on this page. Now, the final example I want to give you is one that is very relevant to today's society and is becoming more relevant. And I've spoken about this before. It's almost become a pet subject, but it seems to affect so much of the population now and an increasing number. And that's this. And it especially affects us because you must be on the internet right now to be listening to me. So the chances are you have had to deal with this, or maybe you are dealing with this. Smartphone, internet addiction. It's uncontrollable. And this tends to manifest itself in various compulsive behaviors, such as checking social media, perhaps checking your email, perhaps not being able to leave your phone, put it to one side for a few minutes. This is becoming more and more of an issue. And as I walk down streets, like busy streets sometimes, the number of people who no longer are looking at where they are going, but are looking at a smartphone is pretty amazing. Now, I do that myself sometimes, but that's only to clear my head of a thought, honest. But this is becoming an issue, and we're going to talk about this shortly, because this is not just an issue that's come out of nowhere. This is an issue that has been deliberately engineered, and we're going to look into how we have become almost examples of human engineering in getting us addicted to these things. And it gives us a bit of insight into how thoughts become uncontrollable. So that kind of leads me into the subject of how do thoughts get out of control in the first place. Because look at it this way. Look at children. Look at newborn children. Look at children a few years old. How many of them do you see worrying about their lives? Now, I know you may think that they don't speak, so how do I know they're not worrying? Well, maybe they worry while they laugh. Maybe they've mastered the art of worrying while they're singing or gurgling happily. But to me, they don't look worried. I don't believe there's a point at which joyful worry becomes miserable worry. If they genuinely were worried as kids, you would notice it. They would have crying and they would look miserable. So I put it to you that those children are not born worriers. They are not born with compulsive behaviors. These are things that have been trained into them either directly by their surroundings or by observing others physically or vibrationally. Yes, children can learn vibrationally. And this is why often they learn the behavior patterns of their parents just through being around their parents. And so we have this idea of genetics and all that sort of stuff that isn't quite as clear-cut as some scientists would make you think, but maybe that's a topic for another webinar. So let's just look at this process then by which thoughts become uncontrollable, because they are certainly not uncontrollable when you're younger, so there must be something going on. And to understand that, let's just have a quick look back at vibrational nudging. Now, I don't know how many people here have watched that vibrational nudging video. It is well worth watching. I think it's a tremendous process that goes along with it, truly life-changing. If you haven't watched it, and you haven't watched it because it's part of the Ultimate Manifesting Framework and it seems to be a long way in, just treat it as a standalone video and watch it. It is genuinely helpful for the stuff we do in the Manifesting Lab, and I think it's a genuinely helpful process anyway. And let me just quickly explain it for anyone who really doesn't know what I'm talking about with the nudging. The idea behind the vibrational nudging is that there's you, and you like to be a generally happy person, so you're always trying to find happy thoughts, and that's natural. Kids, they're generally happy, and as you get into an adult, you kind of remember that you like to be happy, so you try to be happy whenever you can. Then what happens is that you think a little bad feeling thought. Now, as soon as you notice yourself thinking a little bad feeling thought, you stop yourself thinking that bad feeling thought. Because certainly in reality creation circles, we know that bad feeling thoughts are not going to lead anywhere particularly good. So what you do is you take your attention off the bad feeling thought back to your happy place. However, the principle is that your vibration stays where you last leave it. So your vibration, if I can spell it, stays where you last leave it. Okay, I can't be bothered to write all that out. Now, because of that unfortunate tendency for things to operate that way, that means the next time you think about this thought, you're no longer thinking about it from this tiny little place. You're thinking about it from a bigger place, because it's basically got more energy now because you've just thought about it again. So this thought has gone from here to here, and now you're thinking about it as a big thing. Now you notice it and you take your attention off it, back to a happy place again, and you think you're safe from it. But no, you're not, because your vibration stays WULLI. Yes, that's what it means. And so what happens is the next time you think that thought, you think about it from an even bigger place. And so it becomes even more painful to think. And now you want to rush away from it even more to that happy place. And what happens is there comes a point, and let's call it, let's call it the point of no return for no particular reason. I'm just inventing this as I go along. It reaches a point of no return whereby this thought is now feeling so bad every time you think about it, you no longer can go to your happy place. You're kind of out of range of your happy place. So what do you do instead? Well, you perhaps take some action to make yourself feel better. And that action could be anything. But people seem to have a tendency to want to take actions that diffuse their emotions. So those actions seem to revolve around some sort of substance of some kind. And that can be a substance as in a narcotic type of substance, maybe food, maybe drink, maybe, I don't know, whatever. But they take the action to feel better. So they've not now jumped back to the feeling good place, because that's out of range. We've gone past the point of no return where we could have jumped back. And we're now in this weird place where every time this thought activates, we're jumping to an action. So now then the action now kind of diffuses the thought enough so we've convinced ourselves that we're back in this happy place, but we still haven't cleaned up the thought, and your vibration stays where you last left it. So the next time it activates, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, it is getting really big now. It's getting really big. And now we've already crossed that point of no return where we're doing something vibrational, and now we're taking another action towards making ourselves feel better. Now, if you take enough actions, and the actions are things that you're not too happy about doing, then we tend to call those addictions. And I'm sure many of us have experienced that kind of thing in the past. And addictions can range from almost anything. Anything that is a physical action taken in response to a vibrational soothing, you could say. A physical action in place of a vibrational soothing is in danger of becoming addictive. And it gets even worse than that. I never said this webinar was going to be cheery. So let me tell you a thing that makes it even worse. Is that now you've got this bad feeling, disconnected thing going on. And what makes this even worse is that there are other people who perhaps also have these bad feeling things they've built up. Yes, other people. So they might have these bad feeling things built up. And there's another person there who has a bad feeling thing built up. And so these bad feeling things you thought you were keeping to yourself, I'm afraid you were not. Because what's happening now is that all these bad feeling things are kind of coming together into a stream of bad feeling things. You could call it a river of bad feeling things, a river of thought. Now this is quite interesting stuff here, because this is why when you have thought something bad feeling for long enough, you only have to think about it the tiniest bit, and you get swept up in this thing so fast that you have no idea what's going on anymore. You feel completely out of control. The momentum of that river of thought is so powerful. Now, to give you an example of what this river of thought idea is about, there's an excellent story that Abraham told once about a woman who was driving across, I think, one of the bridges around New York City. And there's several bridges there. But she was driving across one. And she'd done this, I think, regularly. But on one particular day, as she was crossing the bridge, and the bridges are quite high, and you're looking down at the river and perhaps feeling a touch nervous. But it never bothered her. But on this day, she had a panic attack. And this is just out of the blue. Just a panic attack driving across one of those bridges. And so she asked Abraham about this. And what they said was quite interesting. They said that all these people who were going across this bridge, they all had a little bit of nervousness about crossing that bridge. Just a little bit. Perhaps some more than others, but just a little bit of nervousness. And now, let's call this nervousness, let's put it in the blue circles here. Now, all these little bits of nervousness, they've been turning into a river of nervous thought, you could say, regarding crossing those bridges. And this woman had somehow managed to tune herself into a bad feeling thing enough that she now became a vibrational match to this river of nervous thought that people had been accumulating from crossing these bridges. And so, the question then became, how did she become a vibrational match to that? Because she effectively went from being reasonably happy, she thought, to having a panic attack. And what it turned out had happened was there had been, I think, some kind of a break-in near where she lived. And she had been thinking about it, and she'd been starting to feel a little bit vulnerable. So she'd been practicing a little bit of vulnerability. And maybe then she'd taken attention off the subject, and then she'd practiced a little more vulnerability. And then she'd taken attention off the subject and maybe practiced a little more. And then she'd reached the point of no return, and she'd reached the point of the river of thought, of vulnerability. And so, can you see how amazing this little idea is, that she had gone from a little tiny build-up of thought into something big. And this led her to have a panic attack. This idea is quite interesting, because what we have here is a river of misaligned people thinking. This is the reason why we come up with ideas like there is a stream of evil. There is a stream of bad stuff. There is a stream of negativity. It comes from the idea of these disconnected rivers of thought. Now, if you've never understood that before, you'll understand why now people are totally believe that there is evil out there in the world, when us reality creation people say there is only good. There is no evil. It's an illusion. And it is an illusion. But it's an illusion that, again, law of attraction will group together those disconnected people who think those thoughts and make it appear real to those who tune into it. However, I have a bit of good news. All these people who are creating these disconnected rivers of thought, they're doing it from their very weak physical selves. They're not doing it from their broader selves, because we all have a physical self, and then we have a huge, much huger than I can put on this diagram, broader self. So there's the broader, and there's the physical. You attract from both of those selves. However, when you attract from the physical self, it's a very little tiny attraction. When you attract from the broader self, it's a huge attraction. And so if you want to manifest things quickly, which is what we want, it's good for the physical self to get tuned into what the broader self is thinking, and then you have an even more powerful attractive place. And if the physical self happens to tune into the broader self more, it's as though the physical self is attracting like the broader self is. And so there's where you get your manifestations. Now, all these people creating these tiny rivers of thought, or these rivers of evil, you could say, they're doing it from the physical selves. So these tiny little selves are creating these rivers of thought. So all it takes is for one powerful connected creator to come along and completely wipe out those rivers of thought. Now, you're never going to wipe it out in the sense that you're going to make somebody not a vibrational match to it if they want to be, but it just goes to show that these rivers of thought that not we, but those other people call evil, they're so minuscule in comparison to the rivers of thought of combined inner beings and the rivers of thought of all your stuff, which is what Abraham called the vortex. So what I'm saying is that yes, these rivers of disconnection do exist, but they absolutely count for nothing when you get tuned in to who you really are and you feel good. So that was a quick crash course in nudging, right? But the thing to take away from this is that by doing nothing else but taking your attention off thoughts that are slightly bad feeling, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what I'm going to show you towards the end of this webinar is a way to put this process in reverse so it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you have no reaction to it. Now we're going to talk about this, and this is coming up in the ultimate soothing thought section. But I hope that was of value to you for those of you that didn't understand vibrational nudging. And I've put a few extra things in that last explanation that I didn't put in the vibrational nudging video. So for those of you who even watched that video, hopefully it was useful. So let us move on. We've spoken about how do thoughts get out of control, and they gradually nudge their way beyond this threshold of control, you could say. Now let's talk about something that seems unconnected, but is actually connected. And it's how to create addicted people. So what is an addicted person, and why am I talking about this? An addicted person is obviously an out of control person. And in fact, we have an industry now developing, and in fact it's developing really well, to make people addicted, to make people out of control. And this entire industry is based upon a field of science that is called neuroscience. And neuroscience is a multidisciplinary science that is basically concerned with the study of the structure and function of the nervous system within the body. Now, I know this is a physical thing, but vibrational stuff manifests through physical means. And so this does tie in, and I'm going to show you how it ties in with vibrational stuff. But commercial neuroscientists have become very good at making us addicted, very good at making us obsessed. And you can see this happening with social media sites. This is where it manifests the most. The integration of smartphones and social media sites. So you see this happening with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, I don't even do social media myself, so I'm sure there's many more. Now, I'm not an expert neuroscientist, but what I'm about to show you is the little trick that lies at the heart of all of this, how they make you addicted. And we shall tie this back into the subject of this webinar shortly.